Hey, welcome to Equal Time Soccer. I am here at the world famous Black Heart of St. Paul in front of legendary Megan Rapinoe. There's some Euros on in the background if you hear it. Some great white noise. I feel like taking a nice nap out here on the patio. Matt's on the ground for this W League playoff matchup, this huge first round matchup for the W League. Matt, you're in Detroit in a sweet Airbnb, it looks like. Amped for the playoffs today, huh?
Yeah, it's great. I came in on the same flight. There was multiple Aurora connected folks on my flight. Uh,
Who name names?
well, Dan Mick, the team photographer, was a couple of rows behind me. I didn't realize because I got on the plane sort of late, and the team is staying right down by the water. Like I'd never been. I've only flown into Detroit to cover other women's soccer games, so I've never spent time like down by the water, and it's awesome. Like
Yeah.
they're right by like
Great
you know
Lakes,
the,
baby.
yeah, it's beautiful. It's really cool.
Yeah. Awesome. So yeah, we're gonna be on the ground. Grateful that we got with Matt there in person. I'll be here at the watch party at the Blackheart. I anticipate a lot of people because I think a lot of people have to get the day off and always fun to watch together.
Yeah, and I
So,
know
but
and I know
yeah,
there's also Bar of Their Own is also throwing it on too. So I'm sure it'll be a couple of
yep,
spots for folks to check out.
they'll be full. Yeah, shout out to Bar Their Own. We're gonna get some good images of goal celebrations there. Let's start it off. So, like I said, crazy matchup for the first round. Round of 16 is Aurora versus Indy 11, a matchup from the semifinals last year. Indy 11 won the title of the W League.
Hmm.
So, because of just a quirk in the way that the layout is, and that these two teams made a run, they are facing off early. Talk about the scout on Indy 11 because they're still a really solid team, but maybe not the same team as last year, just like Aurora.
Yeah, I mean, if Aurora fans are used to hearing about like how uneven the divisions are and how the score lines are lopsided and the divisions aren't competitive enough, to be honest with you, I think the Valley is even crazier than the Heartland division. So Indy 11 did have some games they dropped. They had a couple ties. They lost to Racing for their final game. But really, they're dominant in the regular season, same as Aurora. The difference is they're not putting up the same scale of goals. If Aurora is scoring in the mid 60s the last two seasons, Indy has historically been incredibly steady all three seasons in the W League in those sort of
Yeah.
mid 30s. And so they are playing sort of a tight, competitive game, even when they're winning consistently. And to be honest with you, the big thing that sticks out to me, and I really hate to boil it down to one single player,
Mm-hmm.
all four of their worst performances came when they just didn't have their big time keeper. And so Nona Reason, who started at UNC and transferred to Clemson, by the way, huge
Oof.
shout out to the Indy 11 communication staff, sent over a lot of good materials for me and the Detroit City staff too. Um, but Nona Reason, when she didn't play for Indy, they struggled big time, like compared to when she was out there. And so
Yeah.
all I can say is for Aurora fans, you better hope that Clemson asks their players to report early and that she's down at Clemson. Because if she's there, this is going to be an incredibly tight game. I still think Aurora will have a chance, but I think what you'll see is, the last two games against Indy in the playoffs were 2-1 that first year, and then 1-0 last year. This game is not going to be a blowout. It is going to be close. It's going to be a grind. And to be honest with you, Aurora hasn't had a close match in several games. And so they're going to come in and you're going to see right away whether they're prepared and whether they're ready to play, because Indy's going to take advantage if you mess up. And if you don't engineer a goal in a really careful, crafty way, they're not going to give you one. And so I
Yeah.
think this is going to be the first real test, not just for Aurora this year, but for this brand new Aurora coaching staff. Did they get this team ready? Do they have the right mentality? And I think you're going to see it in the first several minutes of what their mindset is, how far up are they playing, how much of a press are they running. And it'll be interesting, too, to see who they put on that front line that might unlock that press
Mm-hmm.
versus more of a
Mm-hmm.
sort of standard play
Right.
through the middle setup.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, get to that later. But yeah, also something on Indy. This is something that came out publicly, and credit to the W League for at least acknowledging this in the playoff preview. They acknowledge, that Indy 11 had their coach leave. If you want to have a league that we can talk about, publicly as a pre-professional league, nice to just have this type of information. The coach stepped down. The statement speaks for itself. If you read it, some interesting things in there. But regardless,
Yeah.
the main context is this person who was leading them is now gone. And of course it came at the time when they got some losses at the end of the year. Is there any, there's got to be context to that in terms of how you'd think Indy will be, their mentality will line up for the playoffs here?
It'll be interesting to track. We credit to Cue the Smoke, the Indy 11 sort of supporter pod. We listened to them, and they did a sort of nice breakdown. All the Indy fans just refer to him simply as Paulie, the longtime Indy 11 League coach. And so he, over the last 3 years, because he also oversees some of the pro pathway things for Indy, or did oversee that, at times would miss games because he was doing academy stuff or critical things like that. And they said 4 times over the last 3 years, Brandon Kim, who was the assumed sort of interim, has had to step in and lead the team. And so has a little bit of experience. I even literally recognized Coach Kim, from when they were in Minnesota that first year. And so a longtime coach. But yeah, like I mentioned with Aurora, a challenge for the coaching staff to get the team prepared, a challenge for Indy to see if they can get locked in, because their last game against Racing, they got absolutely demolished. Racing was up 6-0 late in the game before Indy pulled off 2 last-minute sort of coincidental goals. And a fun angle for the Minnesota fans here, 2 of the goals that day for Racing were by Sophia Bowman, the longtime Gopher soccer star, who with that game wrapped up her summer run and now is, I'm assuming, back in Minnesota, ready to start some captain's practices or whatever the hell these players do before they officially report. So yeah, it'll be interesting to track. And to be honest with you, it'll be interesting to see sort of what that coaching staff looks like for Indy, but it'll also be interesting to see which of their players they do have. I kind of mentioned it with Nona Reason. But aside from that, they also have some other key players who frankly have not played the last several games. I mentioned one in the stat breakdown we posted on Twitter. Amelia White of Penn State. Fun tie in here. It's Sage Wimes. Sage Wimes is buddies with Amelia White. And so we'll see if Sage gives us any intel today. But Amelia White has not played for them the last 4 games, and coincidentally, that's when their offensive slump has sort of started as well. Yeah. I'm not gonna say that's that might be more correlation than causation, but she was a very, very impressive offensive player for them. 4 goals and 2 assists in very short minutes, so incredibly productive. Of course, every longtime Aurora fan knows Indy's roster is absolutely stacked. You have Soderstrom, you have Rogers, you have all these hitters. And so they will be dangerous no matter who they bring. It's just a matter of degree. It's, are they a 10 on the danger scale? Are they an 8? They will be good, but it'll be interesting to see who precisely they still have in their roster.
Yeah, and I mean, Aurora fans would hope for the fact that there's at least some turmoil. Maybe it is a factor where the coach, on his way out, players who are favorable to him out of loyalty and just, the moment don't play. You don't know. We don't know. We only know so much. We know that he left, but we also know there were some poor results at the end of the year. So optimistic, if you're being hopeful, you'd hope for that. But I'm sure if we asked anyone at Aurora about it, they would say, we're focused on us. We're focused on what we can do. And honestly, if you lost last year 1-0, you have to focus on that, because I mean, it's a frustrating thing, I'm sure, for these teams. I mean, maybe we don't have to talk a lot about it, but it still is a challenge in these different summer leagues having competitive balance, and especially with leagues that are ambitious, I think it comes with a bit more burden in that way. But as teams, we saw a few of Aurora's later results, and we've seen it in other leagues too, not just the W League. But when teams are ending the season with 11-0, 14-0, even 6, those are crazy. We're used to them now. But 6 and 7s aren't very good either. Just talk about that, like the challenge of the leagues building into the best teams being prepared for the level of playoffs, and like how you elevate the league as a parity challenge.
I think even, head coach and sporting director Colette Montgomery kind of said it to you at the media availability and kind of mentioned it. I can't remember if it was on camera or off camera, but kind of said, Aurora the whole year has been relying on the quality of their training environment as much as they've been relying on the games. And I mean, I think that is true, but you and I and everyone who follows the game knows that getting good games also helps so much. And so, to be honest with you, when we're being really optimistic, we say we like the multiple leagues existing, we like the teams existing, because it gives players different options to go to. But the downside, the realistic downside, is you do have this situation where, like, I'm sorry, but I don't want to cover a game that's 14-0. I never want to
not a
cover a game
soccer
like that
game,
again.
and it's not a game anymore.
It's not interesting. The only reason it's interesting is because it helps a player like Cat Rapp, officially become the all-time leader in points and all-time leader in goals. But it's, even for the players, I can't imagine it's that interesting by the second half. So I think what you see is, to be honest with you, what I tell everyone is, yes, there's some imbalance in the regular season. Andy Greeter tweeted about this. He's hopping into some Aurora stuff for playoffs, which is cool. To be honest with you, that is true in the regular season, but here's what I'll say. When you get to the playoffs in these leagues, when you get to the playoffs in the W League, these teams are so damn good.
Best of the best,
and the games are so damn good. Anyone who has watched Aurora these last 2 years, or even in the WPSL, when you get to the playoffs and you are playing the cream of the crop, these teams are incredibly good and incredibly deep. And it's sort of amazing how good the run of play is, considering like all the dynamics of the summer. And so I think, the regular season stuff is what it is. But to be honest with you, I'm really excited that we're just here in playoffs, because the quality of play is just so good once you get here.
Yeah. No, I think even the regular season was more well balanced. There's just certain ways in which I was more thinking, because the playoffs is like, that's the level. It's a great level, and it's kind of you wish, in just comparison, like when people think about professional sports in the U.S., half or more than half the teams in MLS, it can get insane. Where like 60% of teams make the playoffs. This is like it's 16 out of 80, so it's like 15. It's not 15%, but
it's really
20,
competitive.
18% or something. So it is why it's tough. I mean, in the WPSL, similarly, we're going to see Sioux Falls City host. When I watched them play Salvo to essentially clinch their division, that was such a high level, and so you get why fans like to say, God, it'd be cool if, Salvo and Aurora and like the best UPSL team could just be play. And, I get that, because you can dream. And I mean, the leagues are always changing, so we'll see. But I mentioned 1-0 last year for a team that scores tons of goals. You could tell that obviously maybe part of it is having the mentality to overcome that shock of being in the new situation. I don't know how you change that, but who do you think? We've had tons of people scoring goals. Like you said, some of the games inflate some of those numbers, but really dangerous weapons up front for Aurora. Who do you expect to get goals today?
Yeah, I think, the same way I mentioned, I don't want to oversimplify Indy by saying if Nona Reason is here, they're even tougher. And if she's not there, Aurora's the favorite. Similarly, I don't want to oversimplify the analysis of last year's playoffs, but I do want to just name last year.
Yeah.
If folks this year think of how good Katie Duong has been for Aurora, last year Hannah Adler was at least a version of that for this team.
Yeah.
She was
comparable.
She was incredibly dangerous. A lot of similarities in their games. When I pitched Aurora to go get Katie Duong, the really short hand.
Matt's never going to let this go, by the way.
I'm never giving this up. But the shorthand, when I would describe to fans what Katie Duong was like, to Aurora fans, I said, do you remember what Hannah Adler was like? Katie Duong is like that, with maybe even a higher ceiling and maybe even a higher floor. Like, that is the type of player. And what happened last year, by coincidence,
sounds like a whole other story in the house. Higher ceiling and higher floor. I don't even know. Wow.
But what happened last year is, by coincidence of scheduling, Hannah Adler got called into the national team for beach soccer.
Yeah.
So she had to miss the playoffs. And what you saw happen is the whole team got used to playing around Hannah Adler. So Cat Rapp was shredding it last year, but she was doing it next to Hannah, and she got used to playing next to Hannah. Then Hannah is gone, and Cat has to play by herself as the 10. And you're just not able to play the same way, and the adjustment was too dramatic. And so Aurora ends up dropping that to Indy. This year, thankfully, knock on wood, Aurora has not lost any of those key contributors.
Yeah.
And so
who else did we lose last year? Didn't Stone lost at some point? No?
That wasn't for those first two games, I don't believe, and that may have been season one. I may be mixing up.
The first year she definitely left, but I think she I thought she had to leave last year too. But yeah,
the main one was Adler, but this year none of those top performers have had to take off. Knock on wood. And so I think this year it is a little bit deeper of an attacking group. I think Sage Wimes in and of herself is like one big addition. I think Sophie French was here last year, but anyone who watched last year and this year know Sophie French's role is nowhere near the same as last year. You know, she's a huge core component. She's a big, strong number 9. I am very interested to see if they start with French and sort of have that true 9 up top, or whether they start with someone like Cat Rapp and start with a high-pace chaos press. Because I think you will see both of them play, but I wouldn't be surprised. You know, it would be interesting to see which way they go, because I think you're likely to see a Wimes and a Mariah Wynn on the outsides. You know, you're likely to see Stone, Duong, and Addie Wickers in the center. You know, up top is one of those choices, and then the outside backs are the other choice. So do you see Alicia Donnelly and Khalees Barton? You could see those two. Do you see Casey Laurie? So there's only so many spots where you're going to see some of that wobble, and I think it's at the 9 and the outside back. And I think either way the same players will play. It's just who starts first and who has to come on and make a difference off the bench. I mentioned in that stat wrap up, there's essentially
is that the fourth wrap, sister? Stat wrap?
Stat wrap. That's the bonus wrap. The bonus.
Or is that their
bonus.
dog? Is that their dog or cat?
Stat. Yeah, for sure. So in that stat wrap up that I posted, there's essentially 16 Aurora players who have been in the core rotation, and by that I mean have played 30 minutes or more per game. And so I think you're going to see that 16 out there. It's just a matter of how they start and how they sub.
Yeah, well, and having to plan for the first time that it could be extra time. That's the thing where you're like, you have these forwards, you want to be both starting strong and having the potential for weapons at the end. So timing more of a challenge. I mean, that's the first time they'll have to face that. The other side of the bracket, we won't spend any time really digging into it, but for people to watch, it is Detroit City FC who are the hosts. A very cool place to be hosting games. Of course, people are bummed that Aurora doesn't have this first round, but a really cool, I mean, one of the Soccer City USA really is a quality soccer environment. So hopefully they filled up that stadium for the women the way they do for the men. But they're playing River Lights, right? So first, just maybe just give a little shine to them, the fact that it's their debut season there in the playoffs. So right away, a good addition to the Heartland.
Yeah, River Light's been super impressive. I mean, when you look at their team building strategy, it's similar to what you used to see from Chicago City, you know, because, you know, Chad and Heather both have some roots at Chicago City. River Light, you know, openly posts about having 40 plus mid 40s players, you know, seeing time on the field. They have a huge player pool. You know, for Minnesota fans, you can narrow that a little bit. Future Gopher coming in this fall, Maya Nugent, has been super, super fun to watch. She's been really dangerous as an attacker. And that side of the bracket is sort of a Gopher Cup. You have the Childer sisters and Sophia Romine playing for Detroit City. They're Michiganders playing for Detroit City. And they'll face off against Maya Nugent and River Light at that 6 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. or 6 p.m. Minnesota time, excuse me.
Yeah.
So I'll stick around to watch that one because I think it'll be really fun, and just to get an idea of how those teams are playing. Should Aurora get to face them in the next game? But yeah, we had plenty of people asking us on Twitter about, like, do you think Aurora got screwed and all this hosting stuff? And I sort of get why passionate fans would be like, God, how the hell are we not hosting? You know, we're the top seed. You know, we have all this attendance, the quality broadcast, quality venue. The truth is, and I think you and I agree on this, the truth is, well, yeah, Aurora could host every year. I mean, of course they could host every year. They have one of the best, you know, pre-professional soccer environments in the entire country, maybe in the entire world. But that doesn't mean these other places don't also have a really cool environment. And I think the funny thing today is, you know, there's not going to be that many fans for the Aurora Indy 11 game. And so the game we watch first might not have that many fans. But I am really curious to see if the fans show out for Detroit City women, because, you know, I kind of mentioned this in some of the posts. I don't want to be too rude about this, but Detroit City was not competitive the first 2 years in this league. They were like bottom table in the Great Lakes division. And this year they have just been so good, so fun. And so I think it's really cool for them after 2 down years to have this bounce back year and to have the chance to host. And like you said, obviously, we'd love to be hosting these games in Minnesota. I'd love to not fly somewhere to cover a game. But if Aurora isn't going to host, what cooler place to be than at the Detroit City FC venue at Keyworth Stadium?
Yeah. Shout out to the Northern Guard supporters, all the LaRouche, the folks over there. Yeah, I love staying in touch with Detroit City all the way back when they were in NPSL playing my Duluth FC, which shout out Duluth won in Detroit. Sorry, Detroit, and then Detroit, all they did is went on to become the most successful minor league men's club, and they're rising and rising. So they're doing just fine. Shout out to Detroit. Yeah, well, this is a tight playoff weekend, and then we'll go into, for people who ask the potential, we're not Colette Montgomery. We don't think one game at a time. If Aurora wins these two, potentially they could host every round. This is the thing too about the hosting. I mean, I get it from the basic. A lot of sports, it is just the higher seed hosts, if you're able to. But I guess they did announce their format in the beginning of the year, and we, I guess, didn't focus on the unique wrinkle of that that is not a linear thing. If you win, like, you get to host. So anyway, it's so I mean, they still could get games potentially if they win, but yeah, it's just a process where people bid, and if they're able to, the league makes the decision on many factors. So
right.
Yeah.
Well, and maybe there's a small sliver of they weren't in the semis and final last year, so they didn't host a semi and a final last year. It's basically them or one of the West Coast teams that would host the semi. So it's basically we have to hope that Oakland or Cal Storm or somebody doesn't come in with an even sexier proposal.
Come on, man. We got to, it'd be fun to get it back. The playoff games at TCO are electric because people have been very busy with a lot of different soccer. As I watch people watch the Euros, the men's Euros out here. And so, but when it's playoff time like that, and we saw with the women's hockey team, the professional hockey team, when it got into playoffs, the way that everyone rallied, and then even the links, so people are waiting for that moment. I could imagine Bar Their Own and Blackheart filling up. So stay tuned. Matt, you're going to be on the ground, and we're going to get stuff from content. I'm guessing we're going to have people here at the bar. Anything else you want to say about the matchup today?
No, I think watch how the game starts and how high and aggressive Aurora is willing to be, because typically when they play a higher quality team, they're not as risky with that high press. But see if they're willing to be aggressive and start with that really high line and sort of take the game to Indy. And then I also think, that thing people are probably annoyed with me saying, the game is going to be tight for that first 20 to 30 minutes no matter what. It's after that 30-minute mark that you start to see the separation of both fitness, physical tools, focus, determination, all that stuff. And then the other thing I'll say is, if this game is tight, don't be surprised if a Katie Duong set piece ends up being the swing in this, because her locking in as the set piece taker, I think, is a very underrated piece of this. We cover a lot of teams where tons of people take corners, tons of people take free kicks. And what that does is it doesn't let a single player lock in to their service. Katie Duong has been able to lock in. She's playing basically every minute of these important games, and she is really locked in on those set pieces. And Indy is so good that it might come down to one of those set pieces. So don't be surprised if that's a swing piece today.
Yeah, absolutely. So, thank you. And for people who want a little more context, there's still some time before the game. I did a simple breakdown of just these postseason, with the regular season standings, some postseason context for each of the summer leagues. And then, of course, we had some access. Shout out to Minnesota Aurora for their media access. Go to our YouTube to watch that full video. It's on our socials too, but you got to search through stuff. So go to our YouTube channel, watch that, and you can get interviews with Colette Montgomery, Addie Wykers, and who did you get, Matt?
We had Sage Wimes and Julia Sattler. Sadler was one of the core rotation players that we just hadn't been able to get to yet. She's now the starting center back alongside Nicole Norfolk. So fun to give her a little shine. And thanks to everybody, thanks to our patrons. We got the Patreon link down there. Find yourself another independent local soccer site that travels across the country to cover these games. There isn't one. And we're doing it because we get the support from Pentz Homes, we get the support from Modist Brewing, and we get the support from our patrons. And so hop on, throw a couple bucks a month at us, and we will do sicko shit like this all year long. I'm going to LA in the fall. We're crazy all year round. We're going to go to Spokane to cover Jenny Vetter. We're in.
Absolutely. Yeah. Matt, have fun down there. We're going to have a good time here. And then, we'll see what potential matchups come on Sunday.
All right. See you guys.
Later.